right, Dan. So, what is this? This is our third week.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. It's weird that the program I'm using to screen record now has like a square, and like part of your face is in the square, but I can see your whole. Yeah, there you go.
Like right there.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's like a little. It's like seems a little different from normal, but anyway, we had talked about basically high threshold motor units was last week, and now we were saying that we wanted to discuss trophism. And should we release the secret of where we sort of stole / got trophism?
Yeah, I think we could. I mean, the source is like really hard to find now anyways.
Yeah, dude, I saw the textbook online and it was like $180.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
So, all right, I'll tell a story. I think it was. I actually think I got the first copy, and it was textbook of weightlifting. And you and I had been into, Poliquin but a lot of like towards the end of when you were working at GS, we were getting into Anthony DiTillo quite a bit, and then somehow I just randomly found the textbook of weightlifting from Vorobiev, and he was a Russian scientist who was working with cosmonauts and trying to figure out like strength gains and stuff with them. And what's funny with all this is that anytime a Russian was doing research, and to a point Dr. B would even say this, like if they couldn't figure out the solution, they would just take steroids and make the result what they wanted it to be. But Vorobiev, I felt like had the best old school textbook on weightlifting that was like pretty practical, pretty technical, but also simple to understand. It wasn't this jumbled up translation, but he actually talks about trophism multiple times, maybe like 4 or 5 times, where he just mentions the word, optimal trophism. And so you and I basically to this day call everything either trophic or we're achieving trophism with these methods. And I think that from a scientific perspective, I would coin I would define trophism or being trophic as adding muscle mass or adding. It's weird. It's like a combination of like adding mass and adding strength. It's like growing all aspects of muscle without really defining if we're adding mass or adding strength or adding, whatever it is. It's sort of like this voodoo word that we use that I still think has like a pretty precise meaning for us, but it's hard to explain.
I think, dude, you're right. Vorobiev was like the last Russian book where it was like, okay, this makes sense. It was like us, like practical.
Yeah.
Like take some really hard things, dumb it down for everyone in a manner where it's just like, it really is just this.
Yeah.
Like, do not try and complicate it. It really is this. Right? And then all the other books we ever read after that was like, what do these graphs mean? Like, this isn't even real English. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Like, and this is all just scientific bullshit that means like nothing.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't even like firsthand accounts of people that they were training.
And I even think for us, one of the things that we used to like judge shitty coaches was like, if a coach is writing a book and they're using like crazy jargon and they've got stupid charts all over the place, and you're reading it and you're like, how are they going to apply this to an actual training scenario? And I think that one of the reasons why we were drawn to Poliquin and Vorobiev is like, they took the complicated stuff, they might have explained it in a complicated manner with technical terms.
Yeah.
But then it would be like, especially Poliquin, well, both of them, this is what you do. You do a snatch and you do 10 doubles, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Sometimes you go heavy, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Literally it.
Try and understand what technique is.
Yeah.
And then try to use training methods to improve technique while increasing strength.
That's it. Sorry, that's it. That's all it is.
That's literally the secret to being trophic.
Yeah, it's done. It's fucking done.
All right, tune in next week.
Dude, I think Trophism, it's just that range, like you said, where you're building muscle, you're building strength. Is it specific? No. Are you adding a ton of weight, like body weight? No. It's just like that like functional hypertrophy range.
Right.
Where it's just doing everything.
Well, and that's where so I think from a physiological perspective or from like a technical perspective, if somebody really challenged me to push this a little bit more in a description, where I'd be presenting, let's pretend that you and I are presenting Trophism to, I'd say the NSCA, but it's such a group of quacks, it doesn't matter. Let's pretend that.
Yeah.
I would say the two methods would be, okay, so if we can think about, you can add muscle mass through myofibrillar hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, and then in theory, hyperplasia. I would say ideally what we would be focusing on is myofibrillar hypertrophy. So adding muscular density by adding more myofibrils to a muscle cell to make the muscle cell a little bit more dense, and using satellite cells to basically repair and increase the myofibers inside that muscular cell or inside the muscle, and then also potentially using, because I feel like we both do this, is where we'll do like a whole bunch, like let's say there's 8 doubles or 7 triples or something like that, but then at the end of a day, trying to use sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is essentially like increasing the size of a muscle cell.
Yep.
Knowing that there's some potential for the cell membrane to expand and increase strength through sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And I don't know all of the science behind it, but I think that if we would spend 75% of our time in training to 80% of our time in myofibrillar hypertrophy, especially regarding weightlifting, because that leads to technical development, that leads to increased tendon and ligament strength, which is then going to basically desensitize the GTO.
Yep. And
then for our accessory work, we'll use sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, because some muscle groups like the erectors and any slower twitch, even the lats, any slower twitch muscle groups like those two specifically are going to respond a little bit better to more sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is still going to lead to the trophic range that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And if you pull it back a bit, we're training high threshold motor units to work in that myofibrillar range.
Yeah.
And then it's like a step of continually increasing those high threshold motor units, and it's working within all those ranges at all times. So the whole session is set up to literally just increase motor units and be trophic through all the ranges to the end of the session.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think when we're setting up a program, I've started to do it where I'm sitting there going, okay, how can we increase myofibers? And I don't really think that way, but there's a point where I'm like, all right, what's the goal? Like, I got to get a thrower to be like, dude, Sam just cleaned 200 kilos. So I got to get Sam to recruit at a very, very high speed with technique, So how can I do that? And based off of what has worked with us in the past, I'll have him do 8 singles on the minute, and he's got to ramp up and hold himself accountable and absorb that force. And that's the other thing, is that we understand that it's not only about maximal output with weights, but it's also, if we're doing speed-based stuff too, where you're absorbing force rapidly or you're creating it rapidly, that can also increase high threshold motor unit recruitment, which can lead to that really, really dense muscle fiber building buildup that we're looking for with throwers, with weightlifters, with wrestlers, anybody, right? That's not a bodybuilder, essentially.
Right.
And so if we can think about it from the perspective of my throwers, we're going to do stupid heavy lifts on one day, and then maybe in day 4 of training, we're going to do, like yesterday with Sam, he did 5 sets of 2 time doubles of power clean doubles at 160. And so I sort of use that one as a gauge to see where Sam is physically, as far as how is he adapting? Is he partying too much? Is he sleeping well? Is he handling the volume and the intensity that we're throwing at him? How are his throws looking in relation? And then when he has 160 and he's doing double power cleans, can he keep that timing under 5 seconds? And then if he's going above 5 seconds, then I can see, like, well, he might not be eating as much as well as I want, or he might not be sleeping as well as I want, or he's not handling the training load because it's too much. And I think it's like, on our end as coaches, we've got to sit there and play around with those ranges of trophism, and then understand, like, all right, are we trying to, like, get him to gain serious mass, or are we trying to get him to gain muscle density and then in turn increase his coordination?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and what time of the year is it for Sam right now?
He's like 2 months out from opening up.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, you're now it's getting down to that point where it's, you're trying to build a little bit less now. You're trying to monitor everything. Speed needs to come up. You're also, you're trying to look at all his implements and everything like that.
Right. What
are those distances and how everything kind of works into that plan.
Right. I think the hard part that I've encountered with weightlifting is, like, understanding the physical adaptations that, like, we know being trophic is difficult to handle on a regular basis because you're constantly putting stress on the body.
Yes.
And you're constantly just beating the body down, basically. And I think a lot of it comes back to when I'm thinking about the 4 ways that we can increase strength is basically technique, hypertrophy, neurological stimulation through high threshold motor units, and then the 4th would be desensitizing the Golgi tendon organ, right? And I think that's where, when we're building these training programs for weightlifting, is that it's like, there's technique involved. Okay, so where does the technique come into play? And then can we use the technical movements to either increase muscular density, or can we fatigue the nervous system enough so that when they go to squat, they're still going to be recruiting a shit ton and they're not going to get fucking broken down. And I think that's where it's like this seesaw of just balancing everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think we're starting to find too, is like how little can we use in a training session to get the most out of it?
Yeah.
So, like, what are some examples of that, right? Like, using more cleans in training than jerks, right? All of a sudden increasing, and I would say a couple of years ago, this would be called crazy, but using sets of 5, using sets of 4, possibly pushing a set of 6 in the snatch, especially from a specific position, like 2 box, low hang with eccentric, stuff like that. And now we don't need to waste our time with all these fucking exercises because we need guys to train 6 to 10 times a week,
Right.
And how can we just keep them coming back and not ruin all their qualities?
Right. And I think that's, dude, it's funny you said that, because I stole this completely from you, where we were talking about speed and the clean.
Yeah.
And dude, I literally just had this conversation with Jake where we were talking about our best guys, right? Will get smashed by a clean, but they'll still stand it up, and they'll stand up. Jake's best front squat at the time that he cleaned 167. His best front squat was 170, and so it's like, well, why is that? But the point is that we are doing sets of 4 and sets of 5, and I've had Brian Seacrest and I've had Jimmy Duke say to me, these are guys that have trained international team members and basically all youth, junior, senior level, and they'll say, oh, well, you guys are doing sets of 4 and 5. When we see people post that on Instagram, if I don't know who they are and they're doing a set of 4 or 5, I know that they're training with you. And it's like, I think that is a very easy way to increase technique.
Yep.
And because they're gonna get faster into the hole, so then when they're getting faster into the hole, when they're catching and they're lengthening on that catch and they're getting that stretch shortening cycle, now the GTO is really telling them, like, telling the body, like, we've got to recruit the shit out of this so that we don't get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the key to getting them to come back healthy over and over again is manipulating and training the GTO and making their tendons stronger and making their ligaments stronger, because in reality they're only going to get as strong as that 10 to 13% of connective tissue that makes up their muscle mass.
Right, absolutely. And it's so much early in a training cycle, even late in a training cycle, it's so much better to do that than to rip away at a heavy set of 5 in the back squat, heavy set of 5 in front squat, and not being able to train that because you're just moving too slow at that point, right? If we're using a set of 5 that's just throw a rip 140% over your clean and jerk, what's the point?
Right.
Like you're just draining your nervous system doing other things. It's like when we were doing that seminar in the summertime, someone asked about jerk recoveries, and it was just like, stop it, like that's not that's not an exercise, like that's not worth anyone's time. Like people do jerk recoveries with like 230 kilos that can only jerk like
170,
if that, right? If that, and then you can't do shit the rest of the week. There's no point,
right?
No, that's the sets of 5, the sets of 4, sets of 3 on the clean. It's faster. It's basically a squat, anyways.
Yep.
And you're working on timing, and you're in the long run, you're going to be able to do more cleans in a week than you can do squats.
Yeah.
As well.
Dude, I think that's the whole thing. If we can think about too, is that if I'm looking at the way I set up a program, okay, so let's say that like day 6 and day 1 are typically going to be the days that I push the squats the most for most of my athletes, and the reason being is day 6 I'll push it because they're going to be doing an eccentric work, and that's gonna cause a little bit more damage from a muscular perspective. The load is going to be a little bit higher, so the neurological perspective is going to be pretty significant. And that means like that next day, if we would train the very next day, their technique is not going to be as effective. So that, let's pretend that's day 6. Now they have a day off after that day 6 where they can recover, they can lay around and do nothing and just eat, take a nap and recover, so that then day 1 they come in. And I found that if they come in day 1, their snatches, depending on the person, some of them might be grooving, some of them they might not. Depends on the person, but almost always the clean and jerks are always going to be in a pretty good position where they're feeling pretty good, and then we'll squat pretty heavy on day 1 as well. Only because I've felt like I've seen anecdotally from my team is that day 6, day 1, then day 1 it sort of like stimulates this big hormonal response.
Sure.
From those big back squats. So then day 2 we'll go ham again. Day 3 we'll do almost all technique work. Day 4 it sort of depends on the individual. Day 5 we have our athlete day, our like plyometric speed day of like just being mobile. And then day 6 we're back to where we started. So it's like for me, day 6 and day 1 I've always noticed there's a hormonal response on day 1, and then on day 6 we can go ham because we're not worried about technical problems that could be impacted from because they have that extra day of recovery.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. See, I can see that, but I got guys that recover like shit on the second day of the week.
Like, well, I think like, here's my thing though. You got to remember, dude. Probably 75% of my team's women, and like Haley, Anna, dude. Kate was bitching up a storm because she did back squat unbroken sets of 5 at 105 and 110. She was so fucking pissed, like just being a huge bitch to me. Next day comes in, low hang snatches 81, misses 84. Like, I'm like, dude, that's all because you're in a better position because you're feeling everything. And that's what I've noticed with the women is like they'll do really well on day 2. Now, and Jordan does too, but like Jake can't handle like day 1. It'll be like a moderate squat, and then we'll go into day 2. So I do think some people for sure, and this is also goes back to like this isn't how I set up every single program. There's some times where we'll change it up and depending on what my goals are, and that's where I think understanding what form of trophism are we trying to achieve in this specific block. Are we trying to achieve muscular density? Is there a structural imbalance that we have to repair? And that's typically where we're going to start to focus a little bit more with sarcoplasmic trophism. And then, or is there a glaring technical issue that needs to be fixed? And we're basically going to be doing 60 to 80% technique work and then squatting heavy so that they can handle the positions they need to be in, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point about men and women too, is like those sets of 4 to 5, my lighter women literally crave like that type of work. Yeah. If you leave that in their programs, they're going to do the best they possibly could. It could even be in there for like 8 weeks. Right. And they'll just keep making progress. As soon as they go down to doubles or any type of single, it takes they need 8 weeks of that to be able to handle any type of doubles or singles. And then they just peter out too fast. Yeah. It's like they need to build longer. They can peak short, and then that's it. And then you got to start right over. Yeah. Whereas like the guys just literally want to go doubles, singles all the time. Right. And then you put them on 3s and 5s, and they're bitching up a storm because they're sore and they don't want to be sore. Yeah. Right. That's where I think too. I think with women because they're a little bit less fast twitch, they can handle that load. And they recover a bit quicker, and they have less of an ego. They have significantly less of an ego, so they're not constantly like, I want to go ham. They're fine making technical adjustments because they know. And the other thing is that people forget this. If because women are much more likely to make technical alterations and technical changes, they move more effectively and they're less prone to injury, so they can also handle more volume because they're moving more precisely. Whereas dudes don't move as precise because they don't want to make that change, because if they make that change and they go 4 days without feeling heavy weight, now all of a sudden they're sitting there contemplating their life. Their whole life, every decision they've ever made. Oh my God. Dude. Yeah, dude, it's like simply like they have more testosterone. They want to smash it, but it's keeping that in check is way more. It's a lot more difficult to manage than making technical changes with your female lifters or throwers. I'm sure. Like it's just they just have the mindset that it's okay to take their time, make the adjustments, do an extra 1 or 2 sets, and that's totally fine. Or even like a penalty of like, dude, you missed this, you got to make another triple, and they're like, okay, that's fine, you know. Yeah. Whereas somebody else, like, you can see a fucking chair getting thrown across the room because they got to do one more set, you know? Yeah, that's where it's funny because I do think, you know, when I'm writing a program, if I sit down and I go through those four aspects of how to increase strength, and then I sit there and I think about that athlete, like, what does that specific individual need? And then it's like, all right, what do they need? And then where are they the weakest in their technique? And where are they also the most prone for their injuries as well? And it's like, that's where dudes piss me off, because it's like, yo, if you guys saw the big picture at all, you would understand that you need to do this.
but you don't, and you consistently make the same technical errors all the time.
Over and over and over again. Over and over again.
And that's where it's like I think the big benefit behind having kids in technical sports like weightlifting or wrestling or throwing, a technical sport like those, or gymnastics, where at an early age they have to be ingrained that you have to move properly to be successful. Swimming, like I'm dealing with this with Lincoln, dude. Lincoln my mom took him for stroke work, and he PR'd his breaststroke by 3 seconds, and he got out of the pool, and the first thing he said to me was like, "I'm sure that's because I did all that technique work with Cheerios." And I was like, yes, that's exactly it.
Yes.
That's it. Because now it's like he's thinking that way, that the better my technique is, the better my result is. Whereas most men, it's more like the harder I try, the better my result's going to be. And it's not the case.
Yeah, not quite.
Right.
Yeah, not quite at all.
So it's funny. It's funny, like thinking through all this stuff and how to apply Trophism specifically to training. Is like, it's basically sitting down and thinking like, and it's this simple. What is the trophic response we're looking for? How are we going to create it? And then how are we going to manage it and manage the actual like art side of coaching, that when you're implementing the program that you're trying to develop from a scientific perspective, how are you going to manage the personality that you're handling, that you're working with? So it's like, I might even at some points make a trophic sacrifice because I know the mindset of the individual needs it, so that the next day I can get more out of them. It's like cashing in one day to get a little bit bigger return the next day.
Absolutely.
But the net outcome is generally the same. It's just playing the game of that mindset. And I think that's where it's like having seeing that the reward is in the work is one of the hardest things for men to comprehend. And it's like, that's where we would say, having the trophic mindset, the mentality of absorbing trophism would be like, I've got to just fucking go. I just got to listen to Dana. I just got to go. And they push their ego to the side. But how do you I don't know. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but it's like, how do you get idiots to listen?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Dude, I was actually going to set this up for next week. It was the question was going to be, what is like a champion's mindset, or like what's like a Division I mindset, right? We've dealt with kids where like it was clear the second they walked in the door, it was like, we can do something with this kid. Yeah, and there's been times where that same type of kid has walked through the door and we'd be like, I don't know what the fuck's going through this kid's head. Right. Like there's no way. Yeah. There's no way this is going to pan out, right? And it's usually those most talented kids that end up that way.
Yeah.
Instead of the kids that are like, they'll just submit everything and just grind for like 3 to 5 years and get to where they need to go.
Right.
That's always a challenge, is just getting the buy-in. But
dude, that's the funny thing is, I'm dealing with that with my one savage football player, Nicholas. Now he's a 4-star recruit and he's a sophomore. And the thing I said to everybody that trains with him at 6:30, all the football guys, I'm like, dude, Nicholas got an offer in 5 days. He got an offer from Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio State. What did he do? He came in and trained on Sunday. He came in and trained on Monday. He came in and trained on Tuesday. He came in and trained on Wednesday. And he came in and trained on Thursday.
100%.
Yeah. It's just go. Because he hit a triple at 298 in power cleans. And it's like, dude, he just knows he can't change what he's doing, because he's just got to keep, because what has gotten him to this point has been that attitude.
Yeah.
And he's quiet, and he's a goofball, but like, he is quiet for the most part, and he just does whatever you tell him to do. And that's the whole thing, is it's like, he's special, dude. He's like, the kid could play in the NFL, but it's also like, how do you get a kid who's not as special, but he's a little bit more arrogant because mommy or daddy has told him he's the best thing since sliced bread? And it's like, No, and dude, we even got to a point. We had a freaking parent talking to us about changing their daughter back to glide, and I'm like, nope.
No, get out of here.
Yeah,
no,
go
that's not what you hear from, dude. Dude, this was one of the conversations I had with one of my previous athletes, because apparently I've calmed down over the years a little bit. So, I was having an issue with another kid who was like, I'm really trying to develop this kid. He's gonna be something. He's just doesn't quite have it in his head, like being punctual and being on time and like doing all these small things and all this shit and whatever. And this other kid literally told me, he was like, Dan, you once grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and threw me out of the gym and told me to never come back until I unfuck myself. He goes, that was the dip. That was it right then and there. Kid you not, what happens? It shouldn't be that situation every time.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
The kid almost rushed for 2,000 yards that year. He literally set it off after that happened. But like, sometimes like those kids just need like that little like reset in their mind. It's like, you know, maybe that upbringing was maybe too nice.
Yeah.
You know, it just
or not structured.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where I've struggled the most as a coach is like, I've gotten away from goal setting and more into structure. Like we could write all the fucking goals down that I want, but if I don't have a structure to get there and I don't have a plan for you to come in here and follow all the time, you're never going to get there and I'm never going to get you there. We can make all the goals we want, but it's like, it's establishing that structure. And then I do believe that's one thing that, so we were talking about this yesterday, is that Lucas was talking about how Fat Dane was always miserable. And because they were like, bring back Fat Dane. And Lucas was like, dude, Fat Dane used to break chairs and tape measures. He would like throw plates through walls. Like, no, I don't want Fat Dane back. And the one kid, Colt, he's brought to my attention, like, I don't like that you don't tell me if I'm doing something wrong until like 3 or 4 days later. And I was like, yo, that's a fucking good critical analysis of me as a coach, because now you're fucked. Now you're going to get it. And you've got to also realize, as an athlete, not you, but Colt has to realize, I'm going to be critical of you because I actually believe you can make a fucking world team. I believe that you could be on a senior world team, and I will set that structure up now to get you there, because I needed that epiphany from him to accept the buy-in. Because if I'm just hounding him from day one that he walks into the door, he's never going to come back, because I'm going to be that asshole coach who's too hard on him. But when he had that epiphany, and it's like, oh shit. And I think that's the whole thing that comes back to training, is like, especially relating it back to that, dude, I believe there is a trophic mindset of being like, the mindset grows from all the reps that we're doing to impose physical adaptations. And if we can connect that the growth of the muscle mass and the growth of the ligaments and tendons and the growth of high threshold motor unit recruitment, it has a direct correlation to the growth of their fucking mindset. And when that all culminates, that's when you have a freak. That's when you have somebody who's grinded for 5 years, and now all of a sudden they have these technical epiphanies, and they are the savages that we structurally planned for them to become.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's easier said than done.
Yeah. I mean, that's the easiest way I've heard it.
Yeah.
Instead of enacted on it before. But dude, I mean, you're right though. Like it's those moments though. Like I said, like I'm sure both of us have calmed down dramatically over the years. Yeah. But like, but I mean, that's maturity too. Like we're getting older. Yeah. But now we're starting to pick and choose our battles with some people. And like you're saying with Cole, I had the same thing with Brittany the other day. I absolutely threw a fit in the middle of the gym because it was just same mistakes over and over again, not quite thinking before she was lifting. Yeah. And then finally she looked at me and she was like, thank you so much for flipping out on me. And I was like, yeah, of course I'm going to flip out on you. I give a shit about what's going on with you.
Right.
Like sometimes, like, I know it happens with you. It happens with me. Like sometimes we want this shit more for those people than they might want it themselves, you know?
Yeah.
Because we can see the big picture.
Yeah, that's the tough part.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we talked since I lost my shit on Haley. And dude, she handled it. This is probably the best. I haven't yelled at her in like almost a year. Actually, yeah, it was Sunday, so we didn't talk. I mean, we voxed, but like we didn't actually have a conversation. But dude, it's the same shit. She did a she did a pause, double bounce. This is at 118.
Yeah.
Comes up, and I put the fucking video in slow motion. She's still going up and just drops it. And then I was just like, "You fucking kidding me?" And I didn't say anything. And then she does 110, and she just drops 110 because she didn't want to do it, and she like pretended she hurt her elbow. And I was like, "We wouldn't even be doing this fucking set if you gave me that last rep at 118." And she like turns and looks at me and like goes like this. I was like, "That was gonna be your last set. If you want to be a fucking champion, you gotta give me every fucking ounce on that last one." And the thing is, like, dude, she broke down and like started crying, right? Fucking dude, the last 4 days, it's like a whole nother person. She's just smashing everything because it's like there are moments that we do need to freak out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that does establish our own reset, and it establishes resets in the athlete because it is hard, it's grueling, and the shit that we're trying to do, the physiological adaptations we're trying to pull out of people are fucking difficult, and that's why we've taken normal ass people and created fucking champions because we know the shit fucking works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you know, it's like one of those things where my dad didn't follow this that well, but he would always say if he would yell at us once in a while, the yelling was much more effective than if he yelled at us all the time. Now he still yells at us all the time. But it's sort of similar to that, and that's almost, dude, like it's funny because I shared that story with Haley in my therapy. I go to therapy every week, and in my therapy session, I was like, dude, I fucking just lost my shit. But I lost my shit in a calculated manner of like, this is bothering me that she is not giving me the level of effort that I know she can give me. And dude, I started to think, because we're having these discussions, especially we just had that high threshold motor unit one, I was sitting there like, she's sabotaging the adaptation that I want to get because she's just, this is going to be a little bit harder than I want to put out right now. I'm just going to drop it. And I know that I'm Dane's favorite, so I can play the game with him. And it's like, no.
Yeah, I can pull this shit. No, you
can't. You're not pulling that shit today.
No, you can't. That adaptation was everything to us. And you fucking threw it away. How dare you? How dare you?
Yo, isn't that pathetic, though?
Just go home upset about your adaptations.
Yo, that's what's funny is that Caitlin, I'll go home and I'll talk to her and she'll be like, "Do you realize what you're complaining about?" And I'm like,
dude, Jillian does the same thing.
Yeah, and I just sit there, I'm like, dude, the hard part with me is like, I'm constantly chasing those little highs of like,
yeah,
and that's my whole problem is that's why I do get so into it. But I also know like what they experience too, and I think that's the other thing is like, I want to make it so easy, like, or I want to make it so hard to deal with me so that when they leave here, when they're done and they move on in life, and they have some boss, they're like, I dealt with Dane, like,
yeah, this is nothing.
This is easy.
Yeah, this is like, I'm not even, my blood pressure's doing nothing right now. You know, dude, you're right though. Like athlete to coach too. It's like those moments. Like that's why we go ape shit when they're on the platform, because it's like you don't realize how much went into that second or third attempt to put them on a team, secure a medal, secure a stipend, any of that shit. It's just like it's this big release. Like, oh my god, like all that freaking out, all that bitching, all that texting, all that outside of the session stuff we got to do to make sure
it makes it worth it.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah. And it's just this big fucking relief when it all works out the way it needs to. Yeah. You know, it's
big.
It's everything, you know?
Yeah, I think it's big. It's tough, actually. It's like one of those things where, and a part of me is also like, do they need to know like these discussions on trophism and shit like that, or do they just need to like understand like, dude, it's way deeper than you realize? And I think some of them do realize that. And really, it's just like, hey, get into these positions, hit the positions I want, and I'll make sure that there's there's adaptations caused by whatever the intensity level is or whatever the movement is. Those adaptations are going to continue to get you to climb, but you've got to make sure that you're meditating. You got to make sure that you're eating well and that you're doing all this other stuff so that it actually continues to adapt properly.
Right. I mean, there's stuff for us to worry about. There's stuff for them to worry about.
Yeah.
Right. So the tropism and our high threshold motor units, and if we're trying to recruit satellite cells next week, if anything like that, don't worry about that stuff, because sometimes there's nothing worse than an athlete who thinks they're smart as you, or they worry about the details, and then they're paralyzed because now they're sitting there like, fuck, I just missed this set. Dane, what about my trophism? I just committed, this is a trophism tragedy. I don't know what to do. Like, it's like, no, that's fine.
Yeah. Fuck. I gotta tell you this before we go into next week, before we move on. Dude, I just signed with Chinese sprint cycling team to be their strength coach.
Oh shit! Nice.
Yeah. So
congratulations.
Thanks. Their new coach. I know because he would come to. There's a velodrome nearby, so he would come bring his group here when he was coaching Trinidad. And he was a 2-time Olympic medalist, and he's from outside Philadelphia. So he would come and he would see what was going on, and then he paid to do like a clinic with me.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Dude, I think if you got into like sprint cycling, I think you could be like the best strength coach in the world." And for sprint cycling, so I was like, "Yo, if you ever get an opportunity, let me know." So we actually. The Chinese team was the best team at the Olympics in 2016, but they've had 4 coaches over the last 2.5 years because of abuse, disenfranchised athletes that have left, like all this crazy shit. And he's like, "Dude, it's a very well-paying job, but I'm walking into a dumpster fire. It's a mess."
Yeah.
But we could get them back to the top, and if you're willing to do this, like we can do serious damage because they've got the funding. But they need level-headed people that work with the athletes well. So, yeah, I wanted to tell you that because they're 7 weeks out from the World Championships and none of their athletes have a strength training plan.
That's not good.
Yeah, he's like, this is fucking crazy. He just got the job like a month ago, and he's like, I'm watching them do 150 crunches. Then they were doing bench presses, back squats, and then they were doing power snatches at the end of their workout. And he's like,
"Stop it. Just stop."
And he's like, "I'm in China, and they have the worst weightlifting technique I've ever seen."
You have a high school strength program. What are you doing?
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah. Dude, I think one of the things too, and trying to bring this back is I've been reading this book called Essentialism. And it's basically about, like, as business owners, like, cutting out the bullshit. Like, just sitting there and being like, what's going to make you money? What do you like to do? Just do those 2 things. And cut your shit in half. And it's a lot like training. Dude, you look at these programs, and you've got 75 fucking exercises in it, and it's like, you can get away with 3 to 5 exercises in a lift, and you're going to get a better result because of what you're working towards. And it's like that essentialism principle. It made me think about when you had said that with the high school stuff, but yeah, I think if we go into next week, go into satellite cells, because there's a lot more science now over the last decade than there was in 2008, 2009, 2010. Dude, a lot of the shit we would talk about is like real.
Dude, it's when we were talking about that. Yes, so when we were talking about that stuff, whenever I would bring that conversation outside of our gym, very easily. So when I was working with you and when I had moved, the conversation about satellite cells, people would look at me and be like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not a thing." And then all of a sudden, it's a thing.
Yeah,
like,
it's real.
Yeah, it's real. Like, what the hell? Like, just if you even like basic. I don't want to get too far into it now, but like even just like when you're learning about different like fast twitch, slow twitch. And those kind of in-between fibers, they exist. What are you talking about?
Right.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Well, so maybe I'll use this as a preview. One of the things for next week for satellite cells, one of the things that I believe, because satellite cells play a major role in myofibrillar hypertrophy now that they're figuring this out. And I brought this up in 2018 to Kevin Simons when he was still coaching Harrison, and I brought up farm strength. And like guys that I get that come into the gym that have grown up on a farm that carry water buckets and feed bags and catching pigs and shit, turkeys, they grow up and their body creates a mobile human that's also stupid strong and can also recruit really, really well. And up until the age of 12 to 13, before they really establish, like, your body is basically taking all the data up to 12 to 13 and saying, all right, this is what they're going to be facing for the rest of their life. So now I have to create an organism. This is your body talking. I have to create an organism for this soul to survive.
Yeah.
People who grow up in gymnastics or on a farm or doing physical things that require a large amount of force at an early age, they innately, genetically have this incredible amount of satellite cells, so that as they age, their body heals and recruits and recovers by using the satellite cells that it had already believed it needed to have to be predisposed to the hard, laborious life that they were exposed to from the time they were born until they were 12, 13 years old. So if they're growing up on a farm, or I use Harrison as an example because he was in gymnastics for 7 years and then got into powerlifting, and it's like that created this massive reserve of satellite cells, and that's why it's really important for kids to grow up doing multiple sports, but also doing manual or physical labor or whatever it might be, where they're creating or absorbing a large amount of force, because that exercise will lead to greater development later on.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like, if you're a level 10 gymnast by a certain age, like, that's an example, right?
Yeah.
If you're growing up on a farm, that's absolutely an example. If you started wrestling when you were 6, hell yeah, right?
Yeah. As long as your dad's not a lunatic.
He just dumps you off at wrestling practice. See ya.
So that'll be a good place we can end. Next week we'll go into satellite cells and how they impact hypertrophy, technique, and overall health as athletes progress. Because I think that also plays a significant role in keeping athletes healthy. Is like, what do they do up to the point that they hit puberty? Were they deadbeats? Well, they're probably going to be a little bit more prone to injuries than those that weren't, because of how much stress their body didn't adapt to, at an early age. So we can go into that next week.
Right. So if stress hits at 13, then
you're fucked.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Nice, man. Excited for that.
All right. So next week we'll get into satellite cells. I will post this on the group and on YouTube within the next 2 days.
Sweet.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. Thanks, man.
Peace.